Hey everybody, welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast. Broke out the Irish bouzouki today. Play a little Irish blues. The great Jane Lynch's birthday, friend of the podcast, wishing her a happy birthday. And wishing you guys a peaceful Sunday. This is my Irish bouzouki. I got this on a Jackson Browne tour in 2010 at Maple Street Guitars in Atlanta, Georgia. I picked it up and Mark Goldenberg, Jackson's guitar player, said, "Imagine how many girls you'll meet playing that in Central Park." The rest goes without comment. It's a cool instrument, though. Irish bouzouki. All right. Enough wasting time. Let's get into it. How is everybody? I know it's been a while. I haven't stopped speaking out. I haven't recorded one of these in a while, but I've been too busy kind of online trying to deal with everything that's coming our way. And I figured today would be a good day to check in with you guys. So I appreciate you guys listening. Hope you can hear me all right. And, we're in tough times, obviously. I say that every week, and it seems to get worse, It's a really bizarre thing to have a podcast that deals with the kind of stuff, that I talk about on here. It's not meant to be a news podcast, but current events, they're what we're talking about. And obviously there was a shooting yesterday, an attempted assassination of Donald Trump, who is a nemesis to any peace-loving person anywhere, and an imminently corrupt human being who does not deserve to have violence befall him. And I'm heartsick over the fact that somebody was killed in his audience and 2 people were put in the hospital. I mean, it's just disgusting. We're at a disgusting point in our nation's history. The fact that an AR-15 is legal and used against a candidate who will ensure that they will always be legal, and a guy lost his life who was well into that sort of, iconography. I've done some research on the victim, and he was a hero to cover his, family with his body. But, he was there believing in Donald Trump, believing in this lifestyle. They sell clothes, branded, the line, the drop line T-shirts. He was wearing one of them in his picture. He bought what they're selling, as do millions of Americans. And Donald Trump is a con man, okay? He does not care how many people in his audience die. I guarantee you he was thrilled when he saw the video of the blood coming down the side of his face, then he's fist pumping. And it's disgusting. It makes me ill. It's porn. It's porn for morons. It's violence porn, which a lot of our country is now, right? A lot of people are into all this aggression, and every fucking TV show you watch is somebody getting murdered, usually a woman, usually a pretty young woman. I've been watching these Taylor Sheridan shows. It's like his MO. He has a woman getting beaten up in the first 5 minutes. And it's gross. It's gross, and I'm disheartened, and I can't keep doing this. I can't keep talking about this shit. I write on Substack. That's probably where most of my efforts are going these days. I know people respond to this podcast, and a lot of people like to hear me talk, but I just can't keep talking about this shit. Vote blue. The Democratic Party itself did everything they could do to destroy President Biden in the last 2 weeks. Sure, he sucked at the debate. So what? You know, he's an old man. He flew from Italy to do a fundraiser with George Clooney because that was the only day off George Clooney had. That's why he had to fly across 10 time zones to do it. And then George Clooney turns into a rat and writes an op-ed about how he wasn't the Biden he had known a couple years ago. Well, a couple years ago, he wasn't 3 years into a presidency handling 2 wars, you know, and domestic terrorism every other day, getting freaking attacked by his, you know, opposing party. Of course, he wasn't the same man, but he had the same policies, and those policies are working, and they have been working since day one when he rolled out a vaccine that saved the lives of millions of Americans and allowed us to get back to work. That alone should have been reason to reelect him. He should just be like, I gave you the vaccines everywhere. Okay, you got my vote. Right? But he's getting attacked by podcast bros and wealthy white men who don't like him because he doesn't talk well. You know, we're in a hyper-verbal age. Everybody's a slick, fast-talking podcaster. So what? That's not what policy is, you know? That's not who makes great decisions. You know who makes great decisions? Wise people who have a lot of experience and have honed the skill over decades to not think about their own interest because they have more behind them than they do in front of them. And sometimes that's an asset because you're thinking about how you're going to leave this place, not how you can get the most out of it, right? And that's where a lot of politics, you know, fails us these days because everybody's thinking about their career and how this will help them, you know, down to the people that were attacking him right after he had the debate, you know. And look where we are. We spent 2 weeks kneecapping him as a party. Now we're stuck. Now we can't do anything because you can't even campaign. He had to pull all his ads. He's pulling his appearances, as is VP Kamala Harris. They can't do anything. Trump has us over a barrel now. All you're going to see is that clip of him on stage for the next 4 months. And they're going to have all the attention this week, you know, on their own convention in Milwaukee, and they're going to paint the Democrats as the reason this happened. And it's not the reason it happened. The reason it happened is because we have a lot of insane people in this country who have access to weapons of war that they have no business having. You know, that assassin had every legal right to own and carry that weapon. And that's why he walked through a field with the freaking thing, because it's not against the law to carry an AR-15 in Pennsylvania, which in and of itself should boggle your mind. You know, not to mention, according to eyewitnesses, they were pointing him out on the roof and nobody was taking action. And I'll let somebody other than me figure that part out. But the guy only broke the law when he pulled the trigger, which is freaking insane. Nobody should have those weapons, you know. And if you vote for that party that was the victim of that last night, you'll be guaranteeing more of those weapons on American streets, you know. And that AR-15 type weapon is the most popular weapon in this country. And I guarantee you half the people at that rally had a bumper sticker in the shape of one of those weapons or a T-shirt wearing it. You know, so the irony is maddening, but they're human beings. They're fellow Americans, and they don't deserve to die, whether or not they've been caught up in a cult or not. You know, they don't deserve to be grifted and manipulated by a con man such as Donald Trump and his, you know, his close inner circle, and most especially his children. You know, and he's bringing the youngest one up into it now too. You know, if you saw that picture last week. So it all adds up to just a really disheartening, disgusting moment in American history. You know, and we have to remember who we are and where we want to go and what we want to be as a people. Do we want to be a people that attacks a president because he's too old? You know, that's the circumstance we're in. Biden's who you have. If you were having this conversation last summer, more power to you. And you can, you know, clutch your pearls and wring your hands after the fact. He was your best shot to beat Donald Trump. At this point, I doubt anybody's beaten Donald Trump. You know, you're certainly not bringing in a new candidate who's going to fill the party with enthusiasm and everybody's going to get behind him in the next 4 months. You know, you have 116 days or something, probably less. And the Republicans will fight tooth and nail any new candidate. They'll fight them being on the ballot. They'll fight everything about it. It'll be chaos. It won't be a rose ceremony that's a lot of fun to watch and good for ratings, as Bill Maher and some of these other guys wrote in op-eds. It will be a disaster. You know, and Biden already has the Free Palestine movement and all this stuff, you know, these sort of TikTok protesters that protest so they can publish it on their pages and all this kind of stuff. I was at the fundraiser and it was ridiculous. The one in New York City a few months ago, you couldn't pay any attention because every 5 seconds somebody would get up and protest. They would just wait until their buddy was filming before they did it. Which is, when narcissism enters like political action, you have a problem because it really doesn't become about the innocent people that you're protesting on their behalf, right? It becomes about you and your own reach. And that's the problem with our politics now, is everybody's got their own audience, everybody's got their own little media empire, and they'll say whatever they freaking want to say and not think about the big picture. I've never listened to Pod Save America. I don't listen to podcasts, to be honest with you. I don't even listen to the ones I bid on. But those guys did something very damaging to the Democratic Party by opening their smarmy little mouths that night and dissing Biden, because they ignited a media pile-on. So MSNBC and all these other guys booked them on their shows in the preceding weeks, and it was a disaster. And you couldn't have foreseen what happened yesterday, but it happened, and now you're screwed. Now we're really screwed as a party if we continue down that line. What we need to do is rein it all in and start working towards love and compassion. Those people in that field in Pennsylvania were just as American as any Democrat. And any Democrat and any liberal and any migrant who just came across the border looking for a better life is an American too. And we all have to recognize the humanity in one another, and we have to ensure the safety, and the economic viability of everybody. Or we don't have a country. We have a battleground that will be ruled over by a mad king, namely Donald Trump, right? And the SCOTUS gave him the potential to be a king in their ruling. I haven't done a podcast since that happened. That was a one-day news cycle, thanks to the podcast bros, thanks to MSNBC. And I'm not just saying this in sour grapes. I've been invited on MSNBC shows recently. I say no. People always say, oh, I wish you were on all the mainstream media. I don't. I'm not going to help them make money. Those are infotainment programs. Most of those people don't give a shit about your well-being. They all hang out together. That's the other thing with media that folks don't realize. It's a local story. Fox News is right the fuck across the street from Rockefeller Center. Everybody's going out to Watermill on the weekends. Everybody's going to the same cocktail parties. I've seen some of your big liberal influencers kissing ass to Republicans at parties. I've known many of them since before there were Twitter, and all this kind of crap. This new media environment is dangerous, and we're seeing the results of it now. This kid was obviously crazy. It doesn't matter if he was a liberal or a Republican or whatever. He's a registered Republican. They'll paint him as a Democrat. They've already said it's Biden's fault with his rhetoric and stuff. There's no scruples in the GOP. They're opportunists. They wear AR-15 pins on the floor of the House the day after a mass shooting. They don't give a shit that one of their own took a bullet. They're glad that Trump lived because they know it gives them imagery that will be like manna to his followers. And they'll bullshit him and they'll paint it like he's some Clint Eastwood, John Wayne type figure. And he'll get back in office and he'll steal their futures. And then you'll be living under Queen Vunky, for the next few decades. And there'll be an axis of evil that'll be the U.S., China, and Russia, and maybe Iran. And you won't be able to do a goddamn thing about it. But right now you can do something about it. You can vote. You can vote with your fucking everything you have. You can get everybody to realize how dangerous this situation is, and you can go to the polls. You can convince your relatives and your MAGA uncle and the guy at your grocery store who believes in the conspiracy theories, that they're full of shit and they're getting conned. But actually, good luck doing that, because yesterday was kind of the nail in that coffin. And we haven't comported ourselves that well on the left. I'm not proud of Twitter. I've always gone after a lot of these influencers because they wasted 3 years showing Trump clips and rage farming because they knew it built up their followings. And they'd say, vote blue, send me money, help us fight back. They weren't helping anybody fight back. They were expanding their own reach and making money. And Trump knew it. That's why there's endless content from his end. But they weren't doing what would have mattered, what would have expanded the Democratic Party, which is boots on the ground. It's knocking on doors. It's going to shopping malls. It's going to civic events and providing people with the information. And we were just about to do that. Project 2025, was making some inroads, was getting people to listen. Despite all the chaos of the last couple of weeks and what the hit job that the New York Times and the Washington Post and everybody did for Biden. Yeah, he's old. He's a mumbling old guy, but his policy is on point. His policy benefits all Americans, and it's a bunch of young people that get the work done in the White House. As I've said before, the president isn't there to bring in the crops. He's there to be a conductor. He's there to make tough decisions. And I guarantee you he's awake for those tough decisions. You saw that in the NATO, presser. He understands the big picture. He has experience to draw on. He's going to make a decision that's going to be the best geopolitical or domestic decision for the American people. He's going to get legislation passed that has equality baked into it, so other people will benefit from the largest of the U.S. government, which he's already done in the Inflation Reduction Act, and the infrastructure bill. Republicans are campaigning on things they got out of legislation they voted against that Biden got passed. That says it all right there. So I know everybody would like a shiny, slick new guy with cool hair who could talk better, but it's not going to make a difference in the policy. And the guy's already in the job doing it. And you made it hard for him every freaking step of the way. And he's probably got 4 months left, and God knows what lies ahead. And you're a Pollyanna bullshitting yourself if you don't think Donald Trump is coming back to office. He would have won last November if the election was tomorrow. He would have won a week before the debate if the election was tomorrow. He might win even bigger now because of what happened yesterday, because they'll be able to manipulate the narrative and the imagery, and you won't be able to campaign against him in the same way, right? Everybody's already tamping down the rhetoric and stuff, And that's a good thing in terms of incendiary language, because that has no business in the body politic. And I know I'm a comedian, and all the stuff I said about what Trump does is true. He is a drug addict. He is a sexual predator. He is a criminal. He is a money launderer for the Russian mob. He is a sick, dangerous, demented man. His family hid that from you since he was a kid, throwing rocks at babies or trying to throw his roommate out of a window, in his military prep school that they sent him to because they knew he couldn't even last in some normal prep school in Connecticut. He was that much of a problem child. He couldn't go to choke because he would have raped somebody, So they sent him to military school. He's dumb. He cheated on all of his tests. He had to pay people to take his tests. He can't read. He's a moron, but he has myth on his side, right? He's created this image that people were hungry for, especially the kind of people that felt left behind in this country. And they had good reason to feel left behind because they were left behind, because they fell for the last cowboy who sold them a bill of goods, a bunch of lies based on racism, namely Ronald Reagan. Right? They said, vote for me. It'll be morning time in America again. And they waved flags. And then they took your jobs and they shipped them overseas. And they replaced it with cocaine that the CIA was bringing into this country so they could buy more guns and give them to paramilitary groups in Central America because they were apparently so worried about the threat of the Soviet Union. Right? And then the Soviet Union collapsed and another young stud from New York City went into business with them, selling them condos, and then that guy got elected president on the same kind of bullshit messaging, Make America Great Again, which was a Reagan message, and America First, which is inspired Hitler, right? And he's doing the same thing, right? He's going to the disenfranchised and saying, I will give you your power back. Believe in me. And he's wrapping himself in the cloak of patriotism and flags and all this kind of bullshit iconography that works on meager, mediocre minds, right? Because it tickles something in you. It's like watching the fireworks that go off on the 4th of July. It gives you the illusion of power. And the illusion of power is a powerful drug. That's why Trump stood up and bumped his fist a bunch of times, because he knew it would give a hard-on to all those guys watching at home. A normal man would be like, is the audience safe? Let me get the hell out of here so they can secure the situation. Trump immediately turned it, into a campaign kind of moment. The whole thing is just, it's so beyond the pale. It's hard for me to talk about it. And I apologize for my language on this show. I apologize for being disheartened. I'm not trying to get a buck off of you. I'm not saying listen to my podcast, make this the biggest podcast in the world. I don't give an F if you never listen to this again. As a matter of fact, you should probably listen to less podcasts. You should probably read more. You should probably spend more time in nature and around the people you love. If something's making you feel better about your life, listen to it. Take more of it. Ingest it. If it's getting you pissed off about politics, put it aside. And that's not to say don't pay attention, but it's understand this climate we're in, this rancor and this 24/7 onslaught of information, most of it useless, most of it noise and chatter that is giving people a purchase in the media landscape they never would have had before. Somebody with no credentials who never studied journalism can say, I'm a media and news company, and start a Twitter page and have 100,000 followers. And then the next day they can tweet out misinformation and Elon Musk might retweet them and they'll get rich. They'll get paid for it. YouTube is full of this shit too. Listen to experts. Trust your instincts. Don't trust some guy you never heard of before talking to you on the internet. That's crazy. The people who want to help you are not asking you for money. I promise you that. That's a good rule of thumb. They may say, hey, we're doing a fundraiser every once in a while, kick in if you can. But if they're not making it available to you free, they really don't care about your well-being. They're running a business, and that's okay. But see it as such. And think about how much money do we need in politics? Because Citizens United is the reason we're in this mess, right? Because that allowed the Koch brothers and all these billionaires to dump as much money as they wanted to in the political process. That's why they can spend $50 million in Ohio and get a J.D. Vance elected, who may be the next vice president. That's disgusting. He was a scumbag who did the same okey doke on the rural American community, writing his stupid book that all the liberals fell for and made a media star. And he was like, haha, I'm actually a right-wing asshole and I'm going to get a bunch of money from Peter Thiel and run for Senate. And then I'm going to kiss Trump's ass and grow a beard and they're going to make me fascist in chief, someday. That's how this works. It's a scam, and you build up enough of a following and enough power and people take you seriously. And that's not the people you should take seriously. You should take the people seriously who care about the greater good. Pete Seeger didn't have a fucking podcast. He was out there at events spreading truth. I grew up around a lot of progressives, man. It wasn't like it is now. And I'm not saying it's all bad. And I'm not saying you're an idiot if you listen to my show or somebody else's show. I'm saying we got to get a grip on this, because none of this stuff on the left has moved the needle, right? People got really mad at me when I said that to you in November, but it's true. Biden had no cushion. He was making no inroads. When I went to the White House, they said, look, our policies are working. They're benefiting Americans, and Americans don't understand that because we suck at messaging. So they brought in all these influencers, and, some of them did some good work, and some of them were like, how can I make more money? And here we are, no cushion, right? No pad. Biden can't afford another gaffe or another mistake. And my wish is that people tune in to hear him talk now, because it's like they're watching NASCAR hoping for a wreck or something. Like they're hoping he's going to mess up and he doesn't. And they actually hear the policies. They actually hear how what he is doing is benefiting them. All this manufacturing, all this infrastructure, all this construction is benefiting the people who are culturally against him. I went through Pennsylvania after I went to the White House on the midterms. I went to the Martin factory. I went to, Lidditz. It's a town I love in Pennsylvania. I went to all these places, and there was job sites everywhere. New construction, new hotels being built, new shopping centers, new malls. Not all of that is great because we have an environmental, concerns too. But it was new construction. And I'd see a brand new pickup truck in front of a job site, and that pickup truck would be festooned with these America First type MAGA bumper stickers. And I'm like, who do you think gave you the job that you're driving to now? It wasn't Donald Trump, you know? He wasn't giving you consumer protections. He wasn't trying to lower student debt on your kid who might get saddled with student debt. The Republicans were doing all that. They were cutting your health care. And if you put them back in office, there'll be no more Social Security. There'll be no more health care. It may not happen overnight, but they'll chip away at it little by little, and they'll keep the truth from you. And when you find out what happened, it'll be too late, which is what happened in all those Rust Belt communities under Reagan. And they're still paying a price 40 years later. You know, the Trump thing will be almost impossible to dig out of if you reelect him. You can't. So Biden's old. VP Harris is more than qualified to step in, should he not finish out his term, or we deal with that issue later on. But if you give it to the other guy, it's game over, you know? And I'm terrified of that. I'm terrified of that. Not for myself. I'm 53. I'll be fine, you know? I'm terrified for the next generation. I'm terrified for the kids that are already living on the margins, whose parents are already struggling to put food on the table and a roof over their head. I'm scared of the lack of empathy that has become a political party's mantra, hurting people, pointing at the other and saying they don't deserve compassion, they don't deserve justice because they're not us. They're not white Christians. They don't love Donald Trump. They don't love America. They don't love guns. Let's hurt them. Let's lock them up. Let's kick them out. And the Supreme Court is laughing and allowing them to do whatever. You know, they just gutted the EPA essentially with the Chevron doctrine. That's what put the teeth in the policies of the EPA. You know, all these agencies are a new thing. The EPA basically is, you know, 1971 or something, the year I was born, I think it was founded. Nixon established it, right? And they let the companies back then self-regulate because it was a brand new thing. So they didn't really have all the experts in place to even say which chemical was harmful or whatever. So they went to the companies and said, you tell us what you want to regulate. And most of those companies left out most of the bad shit and threw in a few obvious things. And we've learned the truth through lawsuits. You know, PFOAs is a good example. Those are the forever chemicals that are in Teflon, right? Every American, actually every human on the planet has traces of these in their bodies, right? But where they were making them, in Ohio, in West Virginia, they were poisoning the water. They were killing people, and they were lying about it and hiding it for decades because they could afford fancy lawyers. You know, and they were self-regulating to the EPA, and the EPA wasn't going to press them on this shit, you know. And then those agencies build up strength, right? So after a few decades, you got experts in there who actually know the deal, and they know, you know, the shortcuts and the workarounds that industry uses to not, you know, protect the health and well-being of fellow Americans in the name of profit. And they say, not so fast, mister. You tried this back then. We're going to hold you accountable. Well, all those things are gutted now, right? They've lost their power legally. Now, those cases can be decided by federal district judges, right? Unelected officials. People put Trump or somebody else puts on the bench can say, nope, I'm throwing that case out. You got no right to sue Dow Chemical. Boy, get out of here. You know, that's how it's going to go down. That's how it's already going down. And that's not taken into consideration, Project 2025, and replacing, you know, a bureaucracy peopled with skilled workers that have spent their lifetime studying, you know, this particular whatever issue is, chicken clitorises at the USDA or whatever it is, right? You know, these people who are experts in their field will be replaced with Trump loyalists who will do the bidding of industry and Donald Trump for the profit of a few. It's a kleptocracy. You know, and it's scary. It's scary. They're already like halfway there with this shit, you know? So you have to understand that's what politics are. And if the guy who's a bulwark against that right now can't maybe talk so well and is obviously old, so what? You know, in a perfect world, yeah, he'd be a lot younger and have, you know, a lot better verbal skills. But to be honest, Biden always sucked at talking. You know, he has a legitimate speech impediment. His brain works differently. He's trying to not stutter up there, so he's going to confuse names and all that. You know what he's saying. You know what he means, and when you're hashing out policy behind closed doors, none of that shit matters, right? Obviously, the presidency is a bit of a performative job, but if you put it all on that and you ignore the meat of the matter, you're a fool, And you get empty policies, and you get slick-talking dudes who are taking money from industry and bullshitting people, right? And that's what Trump is. Trump can talk good. I mean, if you're an idiot, he sounds like he talks good, right? If you're an intelligent person, you understand he's basically monosyllabic and doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, right? But, if you're partial to that kind of rhetoric, it works. And he's made himself into a superhero now. He's a messiah ruling over a cult. He's got a hold on these people that's just dangerous. It's downright dangerous, and now he's got an excuse to just sort of lock down on everything, lock everything down. He becomes president again. It's going to be chilling. When he was president the last time, I remember riding my bike down Fifth Avenue, and he had closed off with sand trucks every corner, within a 4-block radius, because he was in town for the night or something like that. And it was such a show of force. It reminded me of some autocracy or something. It was like something you would see in China, and I've been around a lot of presidents. I was Clinton's escort whenever he did stuff at Carnegie Hall and a bunch of other events. I worked on Obama's inaugurations, as I've said many times. I was Jimmy Carter's escort on gigs. I did the 9/11 ceremony for 20 years. We had 5 presidents once when the museum opened. Actually, I didn't do 9/11 for I did it for 10 years, and I couldn't do it anymore because the kids, my job in the beginning was to bring the kids on stage to read their parents' name. And when I started, the kids were 2 and 3 years old. And when they started getting into their teens, I couldn't even hold myself together. It was just too heartbreaking, and it was also in stark relief of somebody like Giuliani, who would come down and work the VIP room like it was a party. Giuliani would smile at these events. And I'm like, what kind of ghoul smiles at a 9/11 ceremony? An opportunist who doesn't give a shit, like Donald Trump, who lied about, the towers and his own tower being the tallest building, and tried to use xenophobia immediately and say all these Muslims were celebrating. Nobody was fucking celebrating. People were terrified and scared, and most honest New Yorkers were pitching in and running down and handing out bottles of water to our first responders, It was a disaster, And we're heading towards political waters that are full of class 5 rapids. And that's how you have to think about this stuff. You have to think what is my route through this dangerous stretch of river here that could potentially capsize my vessel and pin me underwater? Because that's what happens when you fall out of a boat in whitewater, right? Your foot gets stuck underground between 2 rocks and you can't get up again, and you're dead in a minute, That's a weird analogy. I've done I've done a fair amount of whitewater rafting, and it's always scary. And you want somebody behind you who you trust, who's been through there before. It's I know it doesn't make sense, but we're going to actually paddle in this direction, and that way the force will bring us back around, You got to foresee the danger. And I think people are so quick to get their content out that they don't think strategically. They don't think, am I hamstringing a president right now who I might need to have a little bit of power and cushion in 2 weeks? Because that's what happened. That's what they did to Biden, as I said at the beginning. They couldn't have foreseen what was going to happen yesterday, but now it's happened. And Biden is infinitely weaker because of that. The chatter stopped, right? Nobody's really talking about replacing him now. You're going to have another pause, as I said, in campaigning. He can't put out ads. What are they going to bring up the talk again a week from now after the RNC? Because the RNC is going to be filled with craziness, by the way. And I'll try to come back and I'll do some more. This won't be the last podcast. I'll come out and talk about that. So that will give us some talking points, but you need a vessel to deliver that people trust. And it's way too late to pick somebody else to carry that message. You're not going to make up for lost time. As it is now, you basically have one shot to win this game. And that's for people to tune in, thinking Biden's going to mess up, hearing that his policies actually are working and benefiting, and getting a sort of populist phenomena happening on our side, right? They have the power myth. They have the superhero. They have a religious type lock over their followers. They have the Christian crap and all this bullshit that they feed their people, the NRA and all this crap. You know what? We have common sense and compassion, and love always wins in the end, right? At least it will strengthen us. You're telling the truth. It's a lot easier to stand up to evil. And we have truth on our side. They don't. Everything's a lie that comes out of Trump's mouth. Everything is a lie. And as I said a million times, he's going to challenge it every which way to Sunday, no matter what happens, unless he wins outright. Then he's going to be like, oh, that was the freest election ever. That was so fair. There was no corruption, whatever, right? But if he loses, he's going to challenge all that stuff, right? So you need to be strong, and you need to be factual, and we need people to get involved in a way that it's unequivocal, right? It's beyond reproach that Biden won, that the Democrats won the election. And we can only do that if we get numbers so large turning out that there's no question. And part of the phenomena we saw last week was a lot of elitists, a lot of wealthy white folks were like, I'd like a better candidate. I'm putting $250,000 down on this fundraiser. I'd like somebody who could talk more than 5 minutes. And I get that. But that's a privileged position. You're saying that from your freaking second home in the Hamptons, sitting around eating canopies with a bunch of other people who spent $10,000 to get a photo with the president. You'd like somebody bigger, but the single mom, who's getting some relief, who got the childhood, the child tax credit, right? Which Republicans killed, but when it worked for the first couple of years, put money back in the pockets of single moms and working class families, helped feed children. They took it away. Those people don't care that he's not a slick talker. The African American community who are getting jobs, who see honest investment in HBCUs, who see that you have equality baked in to a lot of these government programs, where if they give a big contract to some dude down in Alabama, a government, fund to like rebuild a bridge or something, that guy has to, hire a certain percentage of minority workers. He can't just hire his cousin and whoever, Bodie and the boys like he did last time, right? He's got to spread it around. So Biden's already walked the walk. They know he's on their side. I don't speak, obviously, for the black voters in America, but I'm certainly in touch with a lot of them. I certainly have a lot of people I love in that community, and they're all down with Biden, right? They're not going to turn their backs on him right away because some fancy pants actor thinks he's too old. So what? It's working. His policy is what you're voting for, not his rhetorical ability, and that's not to say there aren't concerns, but that's what you want to focus on right now? When you're facing what you're facing and you have so little time and they've shown you the battle plan, they've said this is Project 2025. We're locking it down. You've seen, maybe you haven't seen, you've heard me talk about it. The way it'll really be implemented is they'll have sort of precinct captains, so to speak, right? There's a plan that came out, a sheriff in Long Island wants to deputize like ex-cops and ex-military guys and make them sort of MAGA warriors to fight against any kind of election interference. That's a crazy idea. You don't just deputize randos, and say, you're on the side of MAGA now. You have the right to attack and arrest and shoot your fellow citizens. But that's what they'll do. That'll happen all over the country. If you read my Substack, I was down in Florida where they were, I stayed in a hotel where these guys were training for this stuff. And this guy in Long Island is already training like 70 people for this. So that's what'll happen, is there'll be a big show of force and power, and they'll try to say, like, this is the law of the land. Get with the program or get out. And that's not who we are. That's not what America is. That's Nazi Germany type stuff. That's why they always had flags and swastikas and all this crap hanging everywhere, because they want to let you know they're there to intimidate you. MAGA follows the same playbook. Before them, you didn't have dudes wearing T-shirts and hats and branding and all this crap Trump came up with that because he knew it made him appear powerful. And that guy wants nothing more than to look powerful. You know, when we did the Celebrity Apprentice, he would have Hell's Angels there. He'd have Chuck Zito. He'd have all these Russian mobsters. You were meant to be intimidated. It was like, mess around here and you'll find out. That's what Trump, that's a dumb guy's idea of power. It's like the mafiosa stuff. Muscle, because he's always inferior and intellectually, and he doesn't have any real policy. He's a thug. And thugs want to intimidate you because they want to take your money because you're scared. And now Trump wants to take your power, right? He wants to take away democracy. You can't trust democracy, right? But you can trust Trump. That'll be the message. And he'll lock down so quickly this country if he gets reelected. And he'll use what happened yesterday as the excuse to do that. That's what you're up against. You know, none of this is entertainment. And I know it's hard to take, and I know it's hard to watch. You know, I've seen this clip already 1,000 times. I swear I can't turn the TV on again, you know. But we don't have to live in fear. We have to not infight with each other, right? We have to not, like, turn our backs on our fellow Americans, including the MAGA guys. You know, I do feel genuinely sorry that that guy lost his life. It makes me sick to my stomach. That guy wasn't a bad guy, no matter how much he was in to whatever bullshit Trump's selling them. Lots of guys are into that. In many ways, they were defenseless against this stuff, right? Because a lot of it was generational. He sounds like their grandfather and their father, right? And that's why it's always aligned with cops or firemen or badges or anything that was traditionally the good guys. And all of those, you know, all of those sort of working man, everyday heroes are filled, you know, with good, solid citizens that are salt of the earth in their communities. And that stuff has, and they're not all, obviously there's bad apples in all of that, but that idea has been corrupted and co-opted by the Republican Party, where you're either one of us or you're not. And that's what's so scary, but it has a sentimental resonance with the people that are hearing it, you know. They've replaced empathy with a, you know, a common feeling. This reminds me of something good, but it's not good anymore. It's poison, you know? It's like a McDonald's apple pie. It ain't really an apple pie. It smells like it and tastes like it. You know what I mean? But it's full of chemicals. That's what Trump's, and I'm not trying to diss on McDonald's apple pies. I'm using it as an example, right? It looks like political rhetoric, but it's something much darker, you know? And it just happened, you know, and I don't have a lot of insight on it. It just grosses me out, you know. I wish it hadn't gotten to this point. And I think it's going to be very difficult to beat him now, if I'm being honest with you. And that's not to say that we should be resigned to it. It's quite the opposite. You should arm yourself with facts, and they don't have to be a recitation of statistics. That was the mistake that Biden made. There's a few of them. He shouldn't have done that debate coming back all jet-lagged. If you had a cold, you're president. You know, take the time off. But they obviously stuffed his head with all these facts, and he's trying to recall them. You don't make the guy who suffers from a stutter try to remember facts. I can't remember my facts when I come on and do a podcast, you know. But I know what I'm talking about. I know what the truth is. I know how I feel about the subjects I'm discussing. And so does Biden. And one-on-one, you know, that comes out, or in front of a crowd it comes out. You know, but in that uncomfortable circumstance, it didn't. My point being, pick out something in Project 2025 that you care about and learn about this one particular thing and how it will affect this country. And then go tell people, you know, when it comes up, hey, have you thought about what's going to happen if this policy gets enacted to this thing you love in our community, our library, our lake, you know, our hiking trail, whatever it is. If it's in the environment, you know, if it's in healthcare, and if it's in education, or it has anything to do with equality, it won't flourish under a new Donald Trump administration. I promise you that. That is putting it mildly. It will be in jeopardy. Do you want people you love in jeopardy? Do you want people in the LGBTQ plus community in jeopardy? Do you want Latino Americans and African Americans and Native Americans in jeopardy? Do you want migrants who come here to hopefully, get a safe place to live and a good education for their kids to be demonized? Do you want 12 million people to be rounded up? Think about that alone. Think about what that plan entails. He's going to round up Muslims, Muslim Americans. He's going to round up immigrants, with his deputies, with Johnny fucking, AR-15 is going to be rounding people up. Is going to be going into people's homes. It's a nightmare. It'll devolve into chaos instantly, and the only guy who'll benefit will be Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And that's not what you want. You want to watch Ukraine, after 3 years of bravery, enduring the horrific attacks they've been enduring, just get handed over to Russia? You want to watch the Gaza Strip get turned into a bunch of condos? It's already hell there. Already, Netanyahu's policies are terrible. Everybody can agree with that, right? Even Biden. Biden was representing Israel. He was standing up for Israel and democracy. He wasn't intentionally allowing Netanyahu to do what he was doing. Netanyahu's doing it. Netanyahu's buddies with Jared Kushner. He used to sleep in Kushner's bed when he'd visit Charles Kushner in New Jersey, okay? They're lifelong friends. I guarantee you the Palestinian people will not be better off under a Trump administration. So if you care about that issue, look at it like you're playing chess and say, yeah, I didn't get everything I want. I'm really pissed at Biden for this. But at least this guy's going to listen and could change course. The next guy's not going to listen to you at all. He's going to call up his son-in-law and say, go with that condo project, flatten the place. It's next to the sea, You got to think about this stuff. You got to think ahead. You don't recoil in fear, and try not to give in to anger. I can express anger in a lot of ways, and I do that. And that's what my comedy is, You can use this stuff to sort of off-gas some emotions, but don't let it cripple you or blind you to the truth and to love and to awareness, right? And to the core of your being. There was an article in the Washington Post the other day. It was an op-ed about forest bathing. I'd never heard of it before. And I'm not that bright. So I thought it meant they were like taking a bath, in the forest, like somebody was bringing a bathtub or getting in a creek or something, which I've done. I lived next to a creek in a tent with my dad on Todd Rundgren's farm when I was a kid for a summer. And so I thought it was something like that. It's not. It's just taking nature in. It's looking at the greenery. It's looking at the squirrels and the birds. And that's what I do every day. I live in a park-like setting. It is incredibly beautiful. And when I lived on Carnegie Hill in New York City, I'd go to the park every day, and I would just sit there and look at grass and look at bugs and look at clouds and stuff. It was the only way I could sort of keep my equilibrium balanced with the noise of the city. Here, it's the only way I can sort of stay in touch with myself after I ingest a lot of this political stuff, right? And that's where I do a lot of my writing. Any kind of wisdom that might come through that resonates with somebody, and I'm not saying I'm all wise or anything. I'm just saying if you relate to anything I've written or said, it came more from a tree than it did from me, right? It came from nature because that's your source, and there's something in you that recognizes it when you go sit and stare at it. And I guess that's what forest bathing is, according to this article. So it's like a thing. And I didn't know that, but it made me feel, I've been doing this for years. I'm clean AF when it comes to forest bathing. But my point is, it will embolden your awareness, right? And the more aware you are, the more of an open heart you're going to have. The more you're going to be able to see yourself in the other. And that's how we change this place. When you don't recognize someone as your enemy, but you recognize them as yourself. And you have the awareness to say, like, what's broken in this guy that this is appealing to them? Because everybody's been hurt, right? Everybody's got a cross to bear. It's easy to say, look at those idiots, How could they fall for this bullshit? And in a general way, it's real easy to do that. On an individual circumstance, it's not easy to do that. And if you're doing that, you're cutting yourself off from your own humanity. They use Jesus a lot, right? Didn't he say, forgive them, Father, like they know not what they do? Like he understood, even when he was being tortured and murdered by these guys, that they were misguided. And that's what it always is. Often people who do really bad things think they're doing the right thing. And that dynamic is very present in the MAGA movement and the Republicans. Some of them are real cynical assholes that know they're sons of bitches. Mike Johnson doesn't think he's doing the right thing. He's an opportunist, ass kisser, who clearly is not a good dude, right? A lot of these guys, Jim Jordan, Jim Comer, these are bad men. Mike Flynn, Roger Stone, it goes on, which alone should terrify you, right? Because all those guys are coming back if Trump gets reelected, right? But the rank and file, the folks that were lining up in the morning to hear Trump talk in Pennsylvania, that most of them are not going back to lives that many would envy. They're not going back to their second homes at the beach. They're solidly middle class and working class, some of them upper middle class Americans, right? They're pretty normal. They're pretty close to how I grew up. I grew up with my Irish Catholic mom in Putnam Valley, New York, surrounded by sons of contractors and cops and firemen and a few middle managers at IBM and whatever it was, right? Go to public high school, play sports, go to college, join the army, whatever it is. We all have a common story. There's a baseline of what America is and how we grow up. And it, for most of our lives, that has been the envy of the world in many ways, because it's democracy, right? You didn't have the Tories, fighting with the Labor Party. You didn't have a monarchy. You didn't have like people that were so wealthy that they could just use their money to keep everybody else down. Now you do, right? Now you have one percenters that control so much money that they have such an outsized influence on the political process that it's dangerous. Look at Elon Musk. Read the articles that came out in the Times last week about all the environmental disasters that SpaceX brings on Boca Chica, Texas, which was a wildlife refuge that had all these amazing birds. I've talked about this a lot before. I've written about it in my Substack. He's destroying the environment. He doesn't care. And his goal is to launch 1,000 of these big rockets a year. He already has more Starlink satellites than anybody else in the world up in the sky. He's going to blot out the night sky. You're not going to see stars. You're going to be looking at Elon's, satellites in a couple years. And he was the first guy to go all in with Trump after the assassination attempt yesterday. And I if you take nothing else from my podcast, understand that Twitter is not your friend, and it will not be an asset to you the closer we get to the election. It will be very dangerous, I don't know that Threads will be that much better. Mark Zuckerberg is all in on that stuff too. All of my car rants that talked about SCOTUS were removed from TikTok. So TikTok's owned by the Chinese. None of these guys are your friends. Any billionaire, who owns a big media conglomerate that has to do with social media is probably not on your side, right? But you have lesser degrees of evil. Trump wouldn't have gotten elected without Facebook. So there's nothing unevil about that situation. But Musk is a maniac. Musk is another level psychopath. And that's what it's going to be. It's going to be idiots like that, appeasing Donald Trump, appealing to Donald Trump, and then being snarky frat bros, and the common man's going to get hurt and kids are going to go hungry. And that's the real tragedy. That's what spurs me on and inspires me, because I don't want that kind of suffering. I saw too much of that when I was a kid. I saw what Reagan's policies did, to my friends. I saw the day we went to school and there was no more free breakfast. We used to get up early and go on buses to school because you'd get a free breakfast from my neighborhood. They bussed us in to the nice leafy suburbs. A couple years into Reagan's term, that went away. My mom was still able to provide, most of the time. I didn't go hungry, but I saw friends who did, If you've missed missed meals and seen people not get opportunities because their parents didn't have a lot of money, it's heartbreaking. It'll stay with you for the rest of your life, you know? And there's no excuse for it in a country as wealthy as ours, a country with our military budget. Nobody should go broke for medical bills. And Biden wants to take medical debt, you know, unpaid medical debt. He wants to start alleviating that. He wants to continue to do what he's been trying to do with student debt. These are not handouts. These are sensical things. These things make sense in a society because you don't want people falling too far below the baseline. You do not have a civilized society when that happens. You know, go over to some Scandinavian countries where they don't allow that to happen and take a look at the quality of life. That's what you want. You want, as I always say, people to be able to live and pursue their dreams. You know, you want to find the poets. Right? You want policies that encourage arts and humanities. Not everybody's going to do it or has to do it, but you don't want the guy who has a skill for it mowing a lawn instead and barely surviving when he might have a great novel in him. Not that he's better than the guy who's mowing the lawn. It's that he might write that poem that makes you understand the plight of the guy who's mowing the lawn, and therefore you might understand your own humanity better. Right? And your own connection to other humans in this time that you're alive, this blink of an eye that you're on this planet. Do you want to squander it on hate and anger and taking resources for yourself and making sure your neighbors and enemies suffer? Or do you want to spread love and awareness in all your actions and see everybody blossom and live in a world that, you know, is like a symphony where we're all at least attempting to play along and hear one another, you know? Attachment is like, I don't think I've talked about it a lot on here, but do you know who Anthony DeMello is? Anthony DeMello was a Jesuit priest, and there's a DeMello Center at Fordham University, and he wrote a book called The Way to Love. It was it was a talk he gave actually on PBS in the 80s, and it's in book form. But he talked about attachment, and a lot of people confuse attachment with love, right? So you say, oh, I love her. You know, I met the one. You know, it's like a love song, right? Most of those love songs are about codependence. You know, they're not describing a healthy relationship, right? You're like, you know, I got my one, and all you think about and you obsess on that, right? So you fall in love with the sound of the drum and you ignore the rest of the symphony. That's not what love is meant to be. Love is meant to shine on everybody, right? A tree gives its shade to a saint and a sinner alike, right? A tree doesn't differentiate. A murderer can go sit in front of a tree and get the same shade that, you know, I'm trying to think of a good, you know, that a comic or whoever, right? You know, that's how you want to love. You want to work towards that. It's not saying you're not going to have favorites and partnerships and all that kind of good stuff, right? But you're not going to let the love end at, you know, the end of your driveway, right? Love should be something you give freely and ask nothing in return. That's true love. That's true power, and that's true generosity. You know, challenge yourself to give more, to love more, to be aware more. And the more you're aware, the more you'll find your own problems shrink. That's not saying they go away. Life is hard and it's full of hardship. There's just going to be shit to deal with all the time. The question is, how do you deal with it? You know, do you deal with it, you know, from a place of peace and serenity? Or do you get all angry and worked up and pissed off and spend all your time blaming somebody else? You know, that's unsober, right? To bring recovery talk in here, you know, that's not sober. That's why when you get sober, you do a 4-step. You write down all the stuff that pissed you off and all the bad shit you did, and you tell somebody, you know, and you write down the common traits in there that you can find within your own behavior when you're finally ready to be honest with yourself. And then you realize, that was my problem all along. It was how I was reacting to this stuff. What that other person did to me is really nothing I can do about that now, right? That's none of my business. But I can damn sure keep my own side of the street clean, and that might help me sleep tonight. And it might make me feel better about myself if I sort of understand this and make amends, you know, and don't do it again. And when I do it again, tell somebody immediately instead of carrying it around inside me for 20 years. till it builds up to the point I got to drink myself to sleep every night, That's why you do that stuff. You quiet your mind, clean house, trust God. And God can be whatever you want it to be. You don't have to get hung up on the religion and all this stuff, because not a lot of that has great messengers these days, But don't trip on the substance. All those truths are pointing in the right direction, I've read from Rumi, to Sufi Sufi poets, to, Amma, the hugging saint from India, who'll be back in New York City in early August. I haven't seen her in 5 years. I've been a devotee of hers for 15 years. I go get some of that. Lots of Jesuit priests, as I said, have influenced me. People who are genuinely spiritual, you can see it in their eyes, right? You understand the message. Eckhart Tolle, listen to what he's saying. That's as simple as it kind of could get. The power of now. Just be in the moment, especially now. Especially when you're going to be traumatized turning on the TV. If you're a human being, you can't be traumatized. Just the act of violence against somebody you hate, Donald Trump, it's still awful. It still makes you feel queasy. It should make you feel queasy against anybody. The one time I got in a fight, I punched somebody, and as soon as my fist connected with their face, it felt like it hurt me. I felt it inside myself, like I had betrayed who I was at my core. And that's not to say self-defense and stuff isn't noble in many circumstances. It is. And I'm obviously not a big guy. I was never meant for fighting anyway. But the point is, you don't wish pain on your enemies. You want everybody to flourish. You want every creature to flourish. And we need to create a world in which they can. We need to start addressing, the massive inequality. And I'll shut up here in a minute, but we also... we're losing progress again, right? Climate change is bearing down on us. It's 100 degrees all over the place. Here in New York City, the West just went through hell. We're about to catch it again for like the third week. Houston hasn't had power. Shout out to my listeners in Texas. These poor people in Houston haven't had power in a week. And their governors over in Japan and Asia getting economic summits, tweeting about Donald Trump, and how it's the Democrats' fault. That's not leadership, right? That's not somebody, who's got your back. Ted Cruz isn't handing out ice to homes without power going on a week. It's the fourth largest city in America. They haven't had power in a week. It's Texas. It's the center of the petrochemical industry. They got more money than God, and they don't have a proper functioning grid because their governor took so many kickbacks from the energy sector that the people have no power. Essentially, as the way it's been shaken out, don't let it shake out that way anymore. Vote blue. Vote for Colin Allred as your senator. Get fucking Ted Cruz out of there. Get Governor Abbott out of there next time he's up for re-election. We have the power, but this may be the last time we get to use it. And that's the message you should deliver to your friends and family. Say, yeah, Biden's old. I get it. Let's talk about that in December after we reelect him. Okay? Because Kamala can do the job and the policies will not change. It's the same agenda. And that's how you should think about it. You're electing an agenda, right? A legislative strategy. And does this strategy benefit all Americans, or does it eviscerate the country that I've known and loved and that my forebearers knew and loved, and then many of them spilt blood, and died on some foreign soil to protect? Am I going to hand that over to a guy with bone spurs, because his big proud moment was sticking his hand up in the air? And I'm not trying to make light of what happened. I know it sounds like it's horrible, but think about it. That guy's not looking out for anybody else. Fight, fight, fight. No, fuck you. What do you mean fight? You should be like, seek cover. What is going on here? You want the guy who's telling you peace. Chill out. You don't need more fighting. We don't need more divisions in this country. We don't need more snarky people trying to get their way. Go out and talk to people who've benefited from Biden's programs before you write an op-ed in the New York Times. Don't just talk to your other buddies sitting around the ivy bitching about how old he is. He was the guy who made it through the primaries. You know, next time the guy will be younger. It shouldn't even be a guy. It should be a woman. It should be a woman. I'm only voting for women after Biden, okay? All you white men, don't even think about asking for my vote, okay? People of color, women. I want representation, okay? We've had the chance too long. That's not to say there's no wisdom. It's be an advisor. Be behind the scenes. Use our strategy, you know, and the position of power that the white man has traditionally had in this country to help lift other people up. Say, hey, I think you should be CEO now, but I'm going to tell you what I learned when I got to do the job, okay? That's how you really pass it on. That's how you protect, you know, another generation, right? That's how you ensure dominance. If you really care, you invest in your people and you bring excellence into everything you do and diversity. So everybody's strong. Everybody's got a shot at excelling. And then nobody can stop us. And that's what Biden's talking about. When we work together, nobody can stop us. That's why I like the man, because he has that populist message. He understands. That's a different philosophy than I got mine. Let's make sure these other people don't get theirs. Let's just hand it off to my idiot son because he's white and he played golf with the right guy and he went to Harvard Law. So whatever, we'll just give it to him and not the, 10 times more qualified, woman who grew up in, in a project in Brooklyn or something and worked her way through prep school, and college. And was number one in her class. Let's not give it to her. Let's give it to the guy who can't spell, and spent his college years getting drunk. That's traditionally how we've done a lot of things, right? And this is where it's gotten us because it's metastasized into what we see now. And it's devolving into violence and rancor and idiocy. And we're not that. We're better than that. And even if we've never really been better than that, now is our time to be better than that. Because we have no choice. We have no choice, right? Failure is not an option. We have to succeed. We have to vote blue. We have to not reelect Donald Trump. Okay? All right. So that's a rant. I'm sorry if it offended anybody. Let me pick up my mandolin here again. I didn't even get a chance to talk about like women's rights and abortion rights and all that stuff, but that's all going to come up in Milwaukee this week, and you should look at that, and say, is this who we are? Do we want to go backwards? Do we want these grifters? Do we want Marjorie Taylor Greene setting the course for our future? We don't have kings here, right? We have elected officials, We don't want one man above the law, okay? It won't work out for you. I promise you, if you make Donald Trump the next president, it will not work out. All right, I'm going to shut up. Thank you for listening. Listen to read Noel's notes on Substack. There's a link on all my bios and whatever. If you want to listen to a commercial-free version of this, I have a Patreon. It's Patreon Noel Casler, and you can listen to this whole episode without commercials. And otherwise, just take care of yourselves. It's going to be hot this week. It's going to be frustrating. It's going to be maddening. You come from love. You're going back to love. Love always wins. Be aware. Be present. Be kind. Be peaceable, right? That's how we answer this. That's how we fight back. All right. I love you guys. Thanks for listening. Peace.